Hello and welcome to this episode of Music with Tony Toppi. Today's topic will be building on a previous episode I did on chords and triads. So today's topic is chords, but 7th chords. And similar to the triads episode, we'll be looking at tonic names, how to write individual chords, how to write diatonic chords, how to sing or play these chords, and of course, how to hear them. So let's quickly revise some basic terminology. We have a triad, which is a chord consisted of 3 notes, for example. There are 3 notes there. And occasionally we'll add the upper octave, not considered an extra note, just considered the upper octave of the lower one. We have 7th chords, which is today's topic. And that involves a chord that has the bottom 3 notes as per the triad with the 7th note of the scale. So 4 different notes are involved in these particular chords, and more on that to come. We revise our tonic names, which are about to appear on the screen, and they are the names of notes within the scale. So for example, tonic on the first note of the scale, supertonic for the second, mediant, subdominant, dominant, mediant, leading note or leading tone, and back to the tonic. We have individual chords, so that's just chords on their own without any sort of context. Diatonic chords are chords within a particular key, so they have some sort of context and function. And we have a number of triads that you'll be expected to know for the purposes of VCE music. They are the major, minor, augmented, suspended 4, and diminished chords. And the 7th chords are as follows: the major 7th, the minor 7th, the half diminished, the full diminished, or the dominant 7. I'll just draw your attention quickly to the half diminished chord, and I've got in brackets there minor 7 flat 5. That's probably the more common terminology for that particular chord. It's what you might see on a score or a lead sheet. And also full diminished. You'll see in brackets I've got diminished 7. That's also probably the more common terminology that you would see on a lead sheet or a score. Construction of individual chords. So this is probably the only part of theory where I will use numbers rather than solfa. I just think it's a bit more clear. I'm not going to spend any time on the triads because you can go back and you can watch that episode on triads. But I will focus on the bottom table there, the 7th chords. If you look at the very first chord, the major 7, all these numbers come from the major scale. So that's an important thing to remember, that numbers come from the major scale. Nothing different to that. We're not altering or we're not changing to minor or swapping and changing. All these numbers come from the major scale. So for example, a major 7th chord will have the first note of the major scale, the 3rd note, the 5th note, and the 7th note, exactly as they would appear in the major scale. And then from that, we can actually change these notes to get all the other chords. So very quickly, and then of course I'll explain in more detail. The minor 7th chord has the first note of the scale, a lowered 3rd note, the 5th, and a lowered 7th. The half diminished, first note of the scale, lowered 3rd, lowered 5th, and lowered 7th. Now, just to be clear, that's not lowered from the minor 7th chord, that's always lowered from the major 7. So always going back to the major 7th or major triad. The full diminished, first note of the scale, lowered 3rd, lowered 5th, double lowered 7th. That's what's called, that interval is what we call a diminished 7th. It actually sounds like a major 6th, but for the purposes of theory and for today, it's a diminished 7th. And the last one, the dominant 7th. The first note of the scale, the 3rd note, the 5th note, and the lowered 7th. Now, of course, each of these chords will have a different function depending on the key. but that's why we're talking about individual chords and just how we construct them out of context. Okay, moving on. How to actually write these individual chords. So lines versus spaces. If your first note is on a line, all the other notes will be on a line. If your first note is on a space, all the other notes will be in a space. Key signatures, you don't need them, but you need to know them. So for example, that particular chord I was playing before, that first major 7th chord, was actually an A major 7th chord. And you have to know that in the key signature of A major, there is a C sharp, an F sharp, and a G sharp. Incorrect order, I know, but the order they actually appear within the scale is C sharp, F sharp, and G sharp. So you need to know that they're there. And like I've always said, they always start from the major triad, just the best way to start. So, without any further ado, let's have a look at how we write these chords. So I'm going to start with the major 7th, and we'll stick in the treble clef. And I'm going to move to a different key. I think I'm going to move to F. So there's our F note just for reference. So it's going to have 4 notes, and that's what I'm going to need. The formula was 1, 3, 5, and 7. So there's no altered notes within this chord. The only thing in the key signature for F major is a B flat. There are no B flats here, so this chord is actually complete. And that's a major 7th chord. Let's move now on to the minor 7th chord. And once again, I'm going to start from that major one, the major 7th. It's 1, a lowered 3rd, 5, and a lowered 7th. So you probably remember from that previous episode, I had this little diagram up here of accidentals. If I want to go this way, it means I'm lowering the notes. If I want to go this way, it means I'm raising the notes. So whenever I've got one arrow going down, that just means we lower it by, I suppose, let's say 1 level or 1 accidental. So at the moment, all these notes in the minor 7th are naturals. We need to lower the 3rd and the 7th just by 1 level. So they're naturals, so they have to go down to flats. And that sounds something like this. Okay, moving on from that, I'll go to the dominant 7. So once again, I'm just going to put my 4 notes. It's 1, 3, 5, lowered 7. Same rules apply. It's only 1 arrow going down, 1 level of accidental I need to lower. It's the top note, and it's that. And it sounds like this. And the last 2 7th chords, the first will be the half diminished, or as I mentioned before, minor 7 flat 5. For the purposes of VCE, the terminology is half diminished, but this formula, minor 7 flat 5, is a bit useful, and I'll show you why now. So we have our 4 notes. The numbers are 1, lowered 3, lowered 5, and lowered 7. So we can put a flat there, a flat on the 5th, and a flat here on the 7th. And it sounds like this. Now, if you would compare the half diminished to the minor 7th, so from here to here, you will notice that the only change is indeed that 5th note. It's gone from a C to a C flat. That's how we get that name minor 7 flat 5. So it's a minor 7th chord with a flat 5th. That might be a little trick to help you remember, or just stick with the numbers and you won't go wrong. And lastly, we have the full diminished, otherwise known as the, excuse me, bit of a mistake there, otherwise known as the diminished 7th. So 4 notes, formula is 1, lowered 3, lowered 5, double lowered 7. So it's very similar to the half diminished. And we're back. Sorry for that little glitch in the video. I lost a bit of connection with my iPad there. So back to the full diminished. As we said, 1, lowered 3, lowered 5, and double lowered 7. So something like this. It's very similar to the half diminished, except we have that extra lowered 7th. So as we said before, I'll just re-add my little diagram up here. We need to double lower. So we've gone from a natural to a flat, now to a double flat. And the full diminished will sound something like this. So there are individual chords. Diatonic chords, very similar, in fact exactly the same process as it was for triads. Let's have a look. Establish the key we're in. So the question I will pose to us is to write the submediant 7th of D major. That does not mean we start on D, as we should remember from our triads episode, but let's have a look. So establish the key we're in. We are in D major. Next step, establish the scale degree. The submediant is the 6th note or the La of the scale. So let's write the note that corresponds to that scale degree. It's a B. There's our B note. Add the other notes. Above, look out for 7ths. So this is a 7th chord. It's going to have 4 notes. Apply the key signature. There's no extra things you need to do in these sort of questions. Just apply the key signature. So we know that in D major, there is an F sharp and a C sharp. Within this chord, we can see that we have an F, no Cs, so that's okay. So we'll just add in that sharp. Label the chord if we're asked. So we know from our chords in the previous episode on triads that a submediant is a minor chord. It's got a 7th, so we'll delve into this in a moment, but that's the 7th. And then the root note. So we have a B minor 7th chord here. And then we rejoice because we have completed the question. How exciting. So, diatonic chords in the major scale. If you're going to sing them and learn them by ear, which you need to be able to do, here is a great table, and you could sing starting from the row down here and then working your way up and down each of these combinations, and that will give you every chord that you need to know for VCE music. It's with the exception of the full diminished and the augmented, for which we need to turn to the harmonic minor. So this is what I'd be doing, and I'm starting on A just because it's a bit easier for me to sing at this time. So we're going to have Do, Mi, So, Ti, So, Mi, Do, major 7th, and then we move up. Re, Fa, La, Do, La, Fa, Re, minor 7th, then move up to the next one. Mi, So, Ti, Re, Ti, So, Mi, minor 7th, next one. Fa, La, Do, Mi, Do, La, Fa, major 7th. So, Ti, Re, dominant 7th, La, Do, Mi, So, Mi, Do, La, minor 7th, Ti, Re, Fa, La, Fa, Re, Ti, half diminished, Do. So just be aware that chord 5, or the dominant chord, it's major, but it changes name when it goes to the 7th, to the dominant 7th. Similarly for diminished. And this is only in the major scale. So in diminished, it goes down to half diminished. You will notice that every other chord, it's major as a triad, major 7th, just add the 7 afterwards for the 7th chord. Minor, minor 7th, minor, minor 7th, major, major 7th, different one, major goes to dominant 7th, minor, minor 7th, different one, diminished, half diminished. Similar thing here with the harmonic minor scale. You will notice that there are no 7th chords built on chord 1 or chord 3. That's a VCE thing, not necessarily a world music thing. So let's have a look at these chords. And we're going to be in A minor for this one. La, Do, Mi, Do, La, minor. Ti, Re, Fa, La, Fa, Re, Ti, half diminished. Do, Mi, Si, Mi, Do, augmented. Re, Fa, La, Do, La, Fa, Re, minor 7th. Mi, Si, Ti, Re, Ti, Si, Mi, dominant 7, Fa, La, Do, Mi, Do, La, Fa, major 7th, Si, Ti, Re, Fa, Re, Ti, Si, full diminished, La. So once again, you will see that minor, minor 7. We have the same difference here. Major, dominant 7. Major to major 7th. The diminished remain different. So here in the 2nd chord we go to half diminished, and the final one is the full diminished here. Another way that you might be able to or want to learn how to hear these chords is by the intervals in between the notes. So we did a similar thing with the triads, and here it is for the 7ths. So I'm building upwards. So between the bottom 2 notes is a major 3rd, then a minor 3rd, and then a major 3rd. Major, minor, major. In the minor 7th, it's sort of around the other way. Minor 3rd, major 3rd, minor 3rd. In the half diminished, minor 3rd, minor 3rd, apologies, that was an incorrect note. Minor 3rd, minor 3rd, major 3rd. Apologies for that. Full diminished is all minor 3rds. Minor 3rd, minor 3rd, minor 3rd. And the last one, the dominant 7. Major 3rd, minor 3rd, minor 3rd. So they're all the 7th chords that we need to be able to hear, write and sing for VCE music. If you have any questions, queries or comments, please feel free to email me at tonytoppi@me.com.